Good morning, everybody. This is Simon from The Forge. Nice to hear and nice to speak to you all this morning. Thank you so much for joining. So last week, Ben talked to you a little bit about how to remove the risks in business associated with vagueness and aligning over language. And today, I'm going to give you 15 minutes and I'm going to talk to you about 4 principles really that help you extract the most value from your existing research investments. Just in terms of a few sort of bits of housekeeping, if at any point you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to either use the chat function that's there, or you can message either me, Simon Garnett, or Adam. Adam Rolls directly, and we can kind of pick up on any questions at the end. What I'd also say is if you aren't already, it's worth giving us a follow on LinkedIn and our YouTube channel, details of which we'll post in the chat channel as well, where we'll continue to update you on these webinars and what's coming next. So what's in it for you for today? Well, you've got 15 minutes of your time, and in that 15 minutes, I'm going to share with you 4 key principles for getting the most value from your existing insight work. One thing that never ceases to amaze us at The Forge is the amount of information that exists within every business that we work with. Over the years, studies and findings have built up, and there's now this huge repository in pretty much every business of very valuable information that is available, waiting to be leveraged. And it was one of the core founding principles of The Forge to try and address this reality, which is on every single project, we always start with what a business knows. So typically we will do what we call a phase of recite, where we start to review the information that exists on a project and what we already know. And there is one consistent reality, is that no matter what the business, what the challenge, the answer usually, almost always, is that a business knows more than it realized. It's not unusual for us on a project to receive 100+ documents. I think our record so far is 2.2 gigabytes of data, which was a pretty hefty challenge. Presentations, research reports, strategy documents, tracking studies, technical reports, trends, sales data, you name it, all in some way relevant to the project that we're undertaking. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is that what often happens is that initial number of documents that a client might say to us might be, I don't know, half that number, 20, 30, 40 we think we have. But actually, as the project progresses, all this stuff comes out of the woodwork. Oh, did you know we've got this project? Yeah, this could be relevant for you. I've just been sent this by another agency. So all the time we're accumulating more and more information that we have. And yet, very often when we look at the briefs we get, we see businesses almost reflexively deciding that they need to commission fresh work as the answer to the approach. And listen, don't get us wrong. Primary research absolutely has its place. But surely the point of doing fresh research is that it helps you fill a gap in your existing knowledge. But if you don't know what you already know, then how can you expect to know what the gaps are? You run the very risk and the very definition of madness, which is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So for us, we always start with what a business knows and we build from there. But there are 2 other fundamental reasons we do that as well. The first one is that we believe passionately as a business in being hypothesis-led. Budgets are under huge pressure, as are timelines. We talked previously in one of the previous Ignites about how much pressure there is to do things quicker, faster, and more efficiently. But if you don't know what you're looking for, then how can you ever hope to find it in anything close to an efficient way? So you need to be hypothesis-led. I always talk about have the humility to know you might be wrong. So make sure you design a process that doesn't just do confirmation bias, but always start with a hypothesis of what you're looking for. And the second part is because we do also believe that a large part, if not frankly, sometimes pretty much all of the answer will exist in what you already know. Now the challenge is so will lots of other answers. And it's not going to be sitting there just waiting to be discovered, stumbled across, nicely wrapped up in a bow going, there's the answer, I didn't realize. Instead, there will be clues that if you understand what you need to do with them, you can use to generate the answer. So how do you do it? Well, for us at The Forge, we tend to talk about two types of recite. There's type 1 recite, and effectively this is about sorting and filing. On any study, on any challenge, there will be some things that have been done in the past that are relevant to you, and there will be some things that aren't. Now that's totally normal. There will be a normal project. It would have been commissioned for a different reason. There might be a section of a, 100-page debrief that's highly relevant to your challenge, but there'll be an awful lot that's not. And you can waste a huge amount of time if you're searching through these documents, not quite sure where the information is. And therefore, this type of recite, which helps you quickly and efficiently find what you want, really important. And increasingly, we're seeing AI-enabled tools within organizations to help do this. And we're big fans of this. Why wouldn't you shortcut this process if you possibly could? But for us, there's a second type of recite, one that's actually of significantly higher order and significantly higher value. And it's where we're using that same information, but we're using deduction and implication to draw different conclusions and answer different kinds of questions. So this time, we're using those fabulously inherent human skills of questioning, of challenging, of pushing findings to see if the conclusions that were made were A, actually correct in the first place. And let's face facts, not always, things have changed, contexts have changed, maybe answers were not quite right. And B, can they help us answer new questions that were not necessarily the focus of that work, but can start to signal and highlight what the opportunities might be. So what does this type 2 kind of deductive and implication recite actually look like? Well, first of all, it's worth noting that they're often focused on answering different kinds of questions. Ones that often are proving quite frustratingly elusive within an organization. So why has a particular brand or category stopped growing? How should our portfolio be organized? What are the opportunity spaces? Where should we focus our innovation efforts? These are challenges and questions that at their root are about understanding how customer behavior is changing. And importantly, what are all the different dynamics that explain why that behavior is kind of changing? Very rarely, if ever, is there a single answer to this kind of thing that can be served up by that kind of type 1 searching, filing type of recite. And even if there was, to be honest, that would, for me, be a bit of a flag because, as we know, things are very rarely that simple. But there are some things that can be done to help you get to an answer. And I'm going to share 4 quick things with you. So the first principle is around bringing together multiple sources. It's in our name, The Forge. Why? Because we fundamentally believe that you need to bring these different perspectives together to create a full picture. Single sources end up with one-dimensional answers, and one-dimensional answers tend to fall over. Last year, we helped a major international health and beauty company truly understand the landscape around male grooming. Now, they internally, like many companies, and indeed Nielsen is a kind of classic example, had tended to look at that definition based through a single lens, which is what are products that say for men on them? If you want to understand male grooming, look at products that are marketed to men. Okay, makes some sense, but that's just one dimension. If you look at behavior, what you suddenly realize is an enormous part of this market and the opportunity isn't driven by products used for men. It's actually men using women's products, but feeling that they are better for them, that they're more appropriate, that they're a better solution to their needs. So if you look at these different perspectives, if you just looked at the category for men, you'd end up with one answer. If you look at the actual reality rooted in behavior, you end up with a completely different answer. So some key questions to ask yourself. What are all the angles that we can explore this from? Not just the established, the tried, the traditional ones, but what are some of the different ones, the kind of obtuse angles that we can do? Have we got a blend of different perspectives and approaches? We often talk about this ask, watch, dig, predict. Rational, conscious things you can ask people. Subconscious, emotional things where you need to really watch what they're doing rather than just asking. Unconscious behavioral, where you need to look at digging into their behavior. And then the hardest of all, the prediction. What might people do in the future? Make sure you've got that blend. The second principle I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite that I talk about a lot of the time: challenge, doubt, and question. One of the inherent advantages that humans have over the machines is our ability to doubt our assumptions. AI is still, at this stage, a slave to the programming. It will take the assumptions, it will repetitively learn them, and they become ingrained. That's great when those assumptions are correct, but what if they're not correct? What if the context has changed? We worked with Tesco back in 2015 to review their own label strategy, and this was a kind of the formative strategic piece that led to all of the changes that you'll have seen in their own label kind of approach. So a really fundamental piece of work. And Tesco, back since the 1990s, mid-1990s, when they invented the good, better, best tiering range, that has driven so much success for them as a business, because they were able to say, actually, if we win the shopper, if we can get the shopper in the door, we can offer them everything they might want. So they can trade up where they want to, they can trade down where they want to. They don't need to go anywhere else. And it led to enormous success. 2008 comes along, the financial crisis, and it changed that. People started portfolio shopping. But when a tenet has been so successful, so inherent to your business success, it's very hard to let go of that. And we had a belief that actually it was time to challenge and doubt and question that belief of if you win the shopper, you win the shop. We proved that actually that wasn't the case anymore, and we were able to explain to them why they were struggling and what they should do about it. So again, some questions to ask yourself. What are the prevailing truths in your business? I think this is so important. Every business has these inherited wisdoms that are just trotted out and repeated as if they're fact. Are they still true? One of the things to always look at is what should be true if that prevailing wisdom was true. It just isn't. We worked with a company who had some brand pyramid data from Millwall Brown that said, we will win because of the strength of our brands. And based on that, you would look at it and go, yes, that's true. You would, but they weren't winning. So that logic should have flowed through, but it didn't. So why? You must challenge and question. Big fan of embracing the outliers and contradictions. The reality is we all have confirmation bias. I touched on it earlier. It's hardwired into all of us. We can't stop it, but we can manage it by being conscious and being aware of it. I'm sure you've probably all experienced this, the research you do where maybe you have a slightly different depth or group or whatever it is. And the instinct for so many of us is to always go, well, that was a bit weird. That must have been a bad recruit. It must have been an odd recruit. And maybe it was, but maybe actually it's the key to really unlocking the insight. Maybe they weren't a bad recruit. They were just different because they had a different perspective, which if you understand, you can really unlock. We worked in 2018 with a major snacks company, and they had a segmentation which was good, but it wasn't quite landing internally, and they couldn't understand why. And we looked at it, and actually what they'd done was, unfortunately, they'd ignored a lot of the outliers and the contradictions. So they'd created these caricatures, if you like, of targets that in reality didn't exist. And why? Because of the truth that we know, which is we're all deeply flawed, contradictory humans. We're not rational robots. So of course you're going to get contradictory data because that's who we are. If you eradicate that, you end up with something that's not reality. So again, some things to think about. What is the opposite? What evidence do we have to disprove this? What doesn't fit the model? And rather than ignore it, embrace it. Then the final one I just want to touch on is understanding the context. This is so important. Type 1 recite generally has very little, if any, discrimination. If the terms are relevant, it will serve it up to you. Is it the same as this other piece? I don't know. There's no judgment, right? It's just a serving tool. But information is not born equal. We worked with a major electronics manufacturer back in 2014, one of the first projects we did as The Forge, to really understand their brand. They used a brand tracking study, which gave them a particular attribute, which was very high scoring, and they loved it. But there was a fundamental issue. They were asking people rationally, they were asking people what they thought, what they felt about a brand, which is a very emotional and subconscious kind of problem. They were using the wrong methodology, very simply. So it was an answer. It just was a very inaccurate answer. And we didn't doubt that. We understood the context of that. And we went and proved that, yes, that is true at a top line level, but underneath it, actually that definition of that attribute was completely different from the ones from their main competitors. And so you get so much more richness. So really understanding what is the context for the original piece of work, how similar, how different is that to your context now? And therefore, is that methodology approach actually appropriate for the answers you're seeking? So in summary, obviously, it's not business as usual at the moment. We're all kind of dealing with very strange times. And And a lot of the time I'm hearing my clients, when I speak to them, they're focused a lot on what can't be done. We can't go out and do this type of research. We can't do this type of methodology, et cetera, et cetera. And I absolutely understand that. But to be a bit contrarian, if the upshot of this is that actually, instead, we focus a little bit more on what we already have, so we focus on what we can do with the existing information, not just what we can't, then I think this is only a good thing. Because for me, asking ourselves the right questions, combining, cutting the data in new and interesting ways, these are things that we shouldn't just be doing because we can't do anything else. These are things that we should be doing on every project because it is the most efficient way and the most effective way to get the answers you're seeking. So all I would say is, as we await with bated breath on Sunday the announcements around how lockdown will start to ease, I think that will be a temptation from all of us to jump straight into action and think, right, what's the next study we can get out? We can finally go and speak to people. And before you do that, I would just urge you to pause and just think, are we making the most of what we already know? Yes, it's a bit more time up front, but it will save you so much time at the back end. So that's everything from me. I just wanted to say thank you and open it up. If there are any questions or any perspectives and experience that anyone wanted to add, I'd love to hear them.
Hey, Simon, it's Rosa from Asahi.
Hey, Rosa.
Hey, I was just interested, this is a great topic, really, really relevant for us. I was interested, you mentioned sometimes you're seeing clients use like AI tools or sorting tools so that at least they can do that kind of more basic type 1 kind of recite themselves. I was interested, have you got any like, what are the best examples? Because I think we're seeing a lot of not great examples.
Yeah. It's do you know what? It's very interesting. I've been speaking to a few clients with them, and at the moment, I think there are, what's the best way to describe it? Teething problems.
Yeah.
I think is probably how I describe it. I think one of the things that's so important in all these things is honesty. Honesty about what can be done and what can't be done. I think part of the problem that I see where it's perhaps the problem is maybe people are using these type 1 tools to do type 2 recite. So they are trying to answer these kinds of deduction and implication questions, but using a tool which is actually in reality more refined for giving, serving up an information. I'll give you an example of where we use, and we've kind of used these tools very effectively. When you're going through and we will review everything that we have, and then we suddenly kind of go, I know I saw something that had this data point in it. Yeah. I had this study. Where is it? Where can I find it? It's fabulous for those kinds of things. And I think serving up is probably the best analogy I can do. I think it's very, very good at that. I think when it is positioned or when people think that it can be a shortcut or a proxy for human thinking, that's where I think the problems start to arise.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Be honest, manage expectations.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Cool.
I realised, of course, that image says Google, doesn't it? That is correct. I was going mad. I was suddenly thinking that image said Goggle rather than Google. Excuse me. I'm going to blame lockdown fever. Thank you, Rosa.
Cheers, Simon.
Brilliant. Well, if there's any other questions, please shout. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This will be going up on our YouTube channel. We'll be going up on our LinkedIn. Please do stay in touch. Give us a follow on LinkedIn and you'll get access to what is coming next. We've got some really interesting stuff coming in the future. We're going to be talking to you about behavior change. We're also going to be talking about demand spaces, amongst other things. So thank you so much. Stay safe and have a lovely long weekend.